I stared at the bank statement on my laptop screen, my hands trembling so badly I had to grip the desk. $2,400,000. My grandmother's entire estate transferred to my account just that morning. I'd spent the last 3 hours in a daze, refreshing the page obsessively as if the number might change. The inheritance had come completely out of nowhere. Grandma Helen had always been tight-lipped about money, living modestly in her little craftsman home in Portland, driving a 15-year-old Honda. When the lawyer called me last week to say she'd passed, peacefully in her sleep, I'd cried. When he mentioned the estate, I'd assumed maybe 50 or 60,000. That's what everyone gets, right? Not this. Never this. I closed the laptop and just sat there in my home office, listening to the afternoon quiet. Outside, the suburban Milwaukee street was empty. A cardinal landed on the bird feeder in our backyard. I felt like I was watching my own life from somewhere outside my body. My name is Ashley Mitchell. I'm 38 years old, married to my husband Brandon for 11 years, and we have 2 kids, Emma, 9, and Tyler, 7. We live in a 3-bedroom colonial in Shorewood, a decent neighborhood about 20 minutes north of downtown Milwaukee. Brandon works in commercial real estate. I freelance as a copywriter from home, mostly for small marketing agencies. We make decent money, maybe 1 to 10 combined after taxes, but we're not rich. We have a mortgage, car payments, the usual middle-class squeeze. But now I had $2.4 million sitting in my checking account. The moment felt almost obscene in its perfection. We'd been talking for months about renovating the kitchen, putting in granite counters, new appliances, maybe knocking down the wall between the kitchen and dining room. Brandon had been hesitant about taking out a home equity loan. Let's just wait, he'd say. The market might dip. We should be conservative. Conservative. That word had defined our entire marriage. We'd built something solid and safe. We paid our bills on time. Our credit score was excellent. We never fought about money because there was never enough of it to fight about. We simply did without. And now I had enough that our kids could go to any college they wanted. We could pay off the house, travel, actually retire before we were 70. I wanted to call Brandon immediately. He was at the office until at least 5. It was only 2:30. I decided I'd wait, surprise him when he got home. We could open a bottle of that wine we'd been saving and tell him together. No, I'd make a nice dinner first, something special. I'd pick up a good cut of steak from Whole Foods, maybe get some fresh asparagus and those potatoes he loved. I was already mentally planning the evening when I heard the front door open downstairs. That was strange. Brandon never came home early. I glanced at the clock again, 2:47 p.m. I closed my laptop quickly, a habit from years of working at home when the kids were younger. Couldn't have him thinking I wasn't productive. Ash, you home? Brandon's voice carried up the stairwell. Yeah, I'm in the office, I called back, standing up. Be right down. I smoothed my hair. I was wearing my standard work-from-home outfit of yoga pants and an old college sweatshirt, and headed to the landing. Brandon was just climbing the last few stairs, and he looked off. His tie was loosened. His usually perfect sandy blonde hair was slightly mussed. His face had that particular expression he got when something at work had frustrated him. Brandon was handsome in a conventional way. Tall, fit, with a kind of steady blue-eyed gaze that made clients trust him. He'd been the same in college, reliable, ambitious, the kind of guy you brought home to your parents and they immediately approved. We'd met at Wisconsin, dated for 4 years, gotten engaged right after graduation. Everything had always been so planned, so logical. Hey babe, he said, and he reached out to pull me into a hug. He smelled like his usual cologne and something else, something unfamiliar. Perfume, maybe? Something floral I didn't recognize. I pulled back slightly. What are you doing home so early? Just needed a break, he said, and he kissed the top of my head. Long day. Thought I'd grab some lunch, maybe take a walk, clear my head. Something in his voice didn't match his words. There was an edge to it, a tension that made my new money euphoria pause for just a second. Do you want me to make you something? I asked. No. I'll just grab a sandwich or something. You working on anything important? Just some copy for a dental clinic website. Nothing urgent. He nodded and headed toward our bedroom. I followed him, confused by this deviation from our normal routine. Brandon had never been the type to come home early and wander around aimlessly. Everything he did was purposeful, scheduled. He changed out of his work clothes into jeans and a t-shirt, still moving with that same strange tension in his shoulders. When he passed me in the hallway, I reached out and touched his arm. "Brandon, are you okay? Did something happen at work?" He paused. For just a fraction of a second, something flickered across his face. Something that looked almost like guilt. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual calm smile. "Everything's fine, Ash. Just one of those days. Nothing to worry about." He squeezed my hand and headed downstairs. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to him moving around the kitchen below. The refrigerator opened and closed. I heard him pouring something. Water, maybe, or juice. Everything was fine. He'd said so. There was no reason for the small knot that had formed in my stomach. I went back to my office and opened my laptop again, looking at that beautiful number. $2,400,000. It didn't feel real. None of this felt real. But as I sat there, I couldn't quite shake the image of Brandon's face when he'd walked in. That tightness around his eyes, the way his jaw had clenched for just a moment when I'd asked if something was wrong. It was probably nothing. Probably just work stress. Brandon had been talking for the past few months about a big commercial development project he was leading, some mixed-use space downtown that was running into zoning issues. That would be enough to make anyone tense. Still, there was something about that unfamiliar perfume that wouldn't quite leave my mind. I tried to focus on my work, but my concentration was shot. I found myself standing up and walking to the window, looking down at our backyard. The cardinal was still there on the feeder. Everything looked exactly the same as it had an hour ago. The grass needed cutting, the deck needed staining. The world hadn't shifted at all, except it had. Everything had changed. I just didn't know it yet. I waited until 5:30, then 6. Brandon never came back downstairs. I'd heard him on his phone around 3:15, his voice low and clipped, the door to our bedroom closed. When I'd knocked softly and asked if he wanted dinner, he'd said he was fine, just catching up on emails. That was a lie. Brandon didn't do emails on his phone. He was obsessive about keeping work contained to his laptop or the office. By 6:45, I'd stopped pretending to work. I sat in the kitchen with my laptop still open, the inheritance number glowing on the screen like some kind of cosmic joke. The steak was still in the Whole Foods bag on the counter, untouched. The asparagus was getting warm. I'd been planning this perfect moment for 4 hours, and it was rotting in real time. The kids would be home in 20 minutes. Emma had soccer practice until 6, and my mom was picking her up with Tyler, who had a play date. They wouldn't be back until 7:30. That was supposed to give Brandon and me time alone, to savor the news before the chaos resumed. I climbed the stairs slowly, my heart doing something strange in my chest. Something between anger and fear. The bedroom door was open now. Brandon was sitting on the edge of the bed in his t-shirt and jeans, his phone to his ear. He saw me, and his entire body went rigid. "I have to go," he said into the phone. "Yeah." "I know. We'll talk later." He hung up before the other person could respond. "Who was that?" I asked, and my voice sounded strange to me, thin and high, like someone else's voice. "Work," he said immediately, too quickly. "Just a client callback, nothing important." I stepped into the room and closed the door behind me. "Brandon, who was on the phone?" He stood up, and I watched him gather himself, watched the lie assemble itself across his face like a mask. "I told you it was—" "No," I held up my hand. "I've been married to you for 11 years. I know your work voice. I know your client voice. I know your voice when you're lying, and that wasn't any of those things. For a moment, he just stared at me. Then something in him seemed to deflate. He sat back down on the bed. Ashley, I don't want to do this right now. Do what? Tell me the truth? My voice was shaking now. Brandon, what's going on? Why did you come home early? Why are you acting like you're hiding something? He rubbed his face with both hands. I'm not hiding anything. You're lying, I said flatly. And that perfume you smelled like when you got home? I know every fragrance you've ever worn. That wasn't your aftershave. That wasn't anything from our house. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the cardinal singing outside the window, the distant sound of a lawnmower from 2 houses over, my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. It's not what you think, Brandon finally said. Those words, the oldest, most useless words in the English language. They're only ever said when it is exactly what you think. I sat down on the chair by the window. My legs wouldn't hold me up anymore. How long? I asked. Ashley, how long, Brandon? He took a breath. 3 months. 3 months. 90 days. Nearly a quarter of a year. I thought about 3 months ago, March. We'd gone to Emma's school play. We'd had sex maybe twice that month, which was normal for us. We'd talked about the mortgage rate refinance. Everything had been fine. Everything had been exactly the same. Who is it? My voice was barely a whisper. Someone from the office. You don't know her. You don't know her. As if that made it better. As if the fact that I'd never met the woman made my husband's infidelity somehow more palatable. I realized I was trembling. Actually shaking, my whole body vibrating with something I couldn't name. Not quite anger, not quite grief. Something worse. There's more, I said, and it wasn't a question. Brandon's jaw tightened. He stood up and walked to the window, turning his back to me. She's pregnant, he said to the glass. The room tilted. Actually tilted, like I was on a ship in rough water. I gripped the armrests of the chair. You're going to be a father, I heard myself say. Again, with someone else. I was going to tell you, he said. He still wasn't looking at me. I wanted to, but I didn't know how. I've been trying to figure out how to say this for weeks. How to say what? That you've been lying to me? That you got another woman pregnant? I stood up abruptly, and the room swayed. I sat back down. How far along is she? 12 weeks. 3 months. He'd known for how long? He'd come home to me every single night for 3 months, kissed me goodbye every morning, slept in our bed, and lied. What do you want to do? I asked, and I didn't recognize my own voice. It sounded like it was coming from underwater. Brandon finally turned around to look at me. His face was a mask of misery. I don't know yet. That's what I've been trying to figure out. You don't know if you want to stay married to me or leave me for her, I said flatly. No, yes, He ran his hand through his hair. I don't know what I want. I'm sorry, Ashley. I'm so fucking sorry. I made a mistake, a huge, terrible mistake, and I don't know how to fix it. I thought about the inheritance, the $2.4 million sitting in my account. I've been planning to tell him about it tonight, to celebrate with him, to make plans for our future together, to rebuild the kitchen we'd always dreamed about, to finally feel secure. And he'd been planning to blow up our entire life. I need you to leave, I said quietly. What? I need you to leave this house. Right now. Pack a bag and go. Ashley, we need to talk about this. We need to figure things out together. No, I said, we don't. You need to leave. You need to go stay somewhere else, and we'll figure out the rest when I'm not about to throw up. He didn't argue. He grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and threw some clothes in it, moving with the mechanical efficiency of someone operating on autopilot. He didn't look at me again as he left the room. I heard him go downstairs. I heard the front door open and close. I heard his car start in the driveway. Only then did I allow myself to cry. And when I did, it wasn't the clean, cathartic crying of sadness. It was ugly and raw and furious. The kind of crying that comes when the ground beneath your feet has turned to quicksand, and you're sinking, and there's nothing to hold on to. My phone buzzed. A text from my mom. Emma's practice ran long. We're grabbing ice cream. Be home by 8. I wiped my face and tried to compose myself. I had less than 2 hours to figure out how to tell my children that their father had destroyed our family. I opened my laptop and looked at the inheritance again. $2,400,000. Enough to rebuild everything, I supposed. Corner the one thing that actually mattered. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer it, but something made me pick up. Is this Ashley Mitchell? A woman's voice, professional and clipped. Yes, who is this? This is Detective Sarah Chen with the Milwaukee Police Department. I'm calling because we have some information regarding your grandmother's estate and the circumstances surrounding her death. We need to speak with you immediately. Can you come to the station? My blood went cold. What do you mean, the circumstances? The lawyer said she died peacefully in her sleep. That's what we initially believed, but some new information has come to light. Are you available to come in this evening? I looked at the time. 7:45. My mom would be home in 15 minutes with the kids. Yes, I can come. But can you tell me what this is about? There was a pause. It would be better if we discussed this in person. How soon can you get here? I closed my laptop and grabbed my purse with trembling hands. First Brandon. Now this. The universe wasn't just knocking the props out from under my life. It was dynamiting the entire foundation. And I was starting to realize that I had no idea what I was standing on anymore. The police station smelled like burnt coffee and old paperwork. Detective Chen sat across from me in a small gray room with no windows, a manila folder closed on the metal table between us. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit on them. Thank you for coming in so quickly, she said. She was in her early 50s, with sharp eyes and the kind of face that didn't waste expressions. I know this must be confusing. You said something about my grandmother's death, I managed. But the funeral director said she died of natural causes. Cardiac arrest, they said. Detective Chen opened the folder. Inside were photographs. Crime scene photos, I realized with a lurch in my stomach. Grandma Helen's bedroom. Her body in the bed, looking peaceful, almost serene. But there was something else. Something on the nightstand. Your grandmother's death was not natural, Chen said quietly. The medical examiner performed a second autopsy at the request of a person who came forward. They found traces of digoxin in her system. It's a heart medication, but in high doses it acts as a poison. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. Someone poisoned her? My voice sounded like it was coming from very far away. We believe so, and we have a strong suspect. Chen pulled out another photograph. It was a woman I'd never seen before. Dark hair, mid-30s, with the kind of aggressively styled look that screamed new money. This is Brittany Walsh. She's been Brandon's girlfriend for approximately 4 months, which means she was already in the picture when your grandmother died. My brain couldn't process the timeline. Brandon had been with Brittany for 3 months, he'd said. But Grandma Helen had died 5 months ago. Unless he'd been lying about that too. I don't understand, I whispered. Why would she want to hurt my grandmother? Chen leaned back in her chair. That's the interesting part. Your grandmother left a will. The original will, dated 15 years ago, left everything to you. But 6 months ago, just before her death, she changed it. She was going to leave everything to Brandon. The new will was found in her safe deposit box at the bank, witnessed by a notary public, but never executed because she died before she could sign the final documents. What? I couldn't breathe. Brandon told me she died peacefully. He said the lawyer called and told me about the inheritance. He said... I stopped. Brandon had been the one to tell me to call the lawyer. He'd been the one who suggested I check my account that day. He'd orchestrated the entire thing. We found emails between Brandon and Brittany, Chen continued, opening her laptop. They're quite explicit. Brittany was supposed to convince your grandmother to change her will. In exchange, Brandon promised to leave you and marry her. They had a plan to eventually take over your grandmother's property and liquidate her estate. I read the emails on the screen. My husband's words, written to another woman. Casual cruelty dressed up in corporate jargon. Once the old lady signs the new will, we're set. Ashley will never see it coming. We'll have time to set up the trust accounts before the estate goes through probate. Brittany gave your grandmother an overdose of her own medication, Chen said. We found the empty bottle hidden in Brittany's apartment, along with a detailed plan of the inheritance scheme. Your grandmother must have realized what was happening. She'd actually gone back to her lawyer 3 days before she died and requested that the will be reverted to the original version. She had an appointment to come in and sign the new documents, but she died before she could make it. I pressed my hands against my eyes. The inheritance. The $2.4 million that had felt like salvation just hours ago. It had never been meant for me. It had been meant for Brandon. Obtained through murder and fraud. Where is he? I asked. Where's Brandon? We issued an arrest warrant this afternoon. He was picked up at a hotel in Chicago approximately 2 hours ago. He's currently in custody, pending extradition back to Wisconsin. The room spun. My husband was in jail. My marriage was a lie. My grandmother had been killed by a woman he'd been cheating on me with. What about the inheritance? I asked numbly. Can they take it back? That's going to be a civil matter, Chen said. But yes, given the circumstances, the court will likely freeze the account and reverse the transfer. The estate will need to go through probate again, and your grandmother's wishes, her true wishes, will be honored. Everything was supposed to go to you anyway. I don't want it, I said. I don't want any of it. I understand, but you should speak with an attorney about your options. You're also going to be a key witness in the criminal proceedings against both Brandon and Brittany. I stood up, my legs unsteady. The detective walked me out through the maze of desks and cubicles. Officers were everywhere, the station humming with the machinery of justice. It felt obscene, like the system was actually working, catching the bad guys, protecting the innocent, except it had taken my grandmother's death to do it. My phone had been buzzing the entire time I was in the station. Texts from my mom, asking where I was. Texts from my sister, who must have heard something. Missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. By the time I got to my car, I had 43 unread messages. The news had leaked. It was already on the local news websites. Real estate executive arrested in wife's grandmother's death. Affair partner suspected in poisoning death. Milwaukee man charged with conspiracy to commit murder. I drove home in a daze. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. My mom's car was parked on the street, and I could see her silhouette in the kitchen window through the dining room. She'd brought the kids inside, I realized. She was waiting for me to come back and explain why their father had been arrested. Emma was sitting at the kitchen table with a juice box, her eyes red. Tyler was on the couch watching cartoons with the sound off, his face blank. My mom stood when she saw me, her expression caught somewhere between fury and pity. "Ashley, what in God's name is going on?" she demanded. "The police called me asking about Brandon. They said something about your grandmother, but that doesn't make any sense. Your grandmother died of natural causes. I was at the funeral. I saw..." "It wasn't natural," I said, and my voice sounded hollow. "Brandon and his girlfriend poisoned her. They were trying to steal her money. Everything that's happened today, the inheritance, Brandon coming home, all of it, it was all part of their plan." My mom's face went white. She sat down heavily in one of the kitchen chairs. "Where are the kids?" I asked, though I could see them. Emma heard some of it on my phone. Tyler doesn't understand yet, but he will. Ashley, I don't even know what to say. What are you going to do? What was I going to do? That was the question I'd been avoiding since the detective had opened that folder. I'm going to get a divorce attorney tomorrow morning, I said, and the words felt strange in my mouth. I'm going to fight for full custody. I'm going to make sure my kids understand that what their father did has nothing to do with them. And the money? My mom asked carefully. I'm giving it back, I said. All of it. I don't care if it takes lawyers years to sort out. I'm not keeping a single penny that was meant to come from my grandmother's death. Emma started crying. I went to her and pulled her into my arms, and she sobbed against my chest, not understanding what was happening, but understanding that everything had changed. Tyler watched us from the couch with the kind of blank shock that only children can master. Over the next few months, the legal machinery churned forward. Brandon was charged with conspiracy to commit murder and fraud. Brittany was charged with the actual poisoning and premeditated murder. Both of them maintained their innocence, but the evidence was overwhelming. The emails, the empty medication bottle, the notary who'd witnessed the forged will, the bank records showing transfers between Brandon's accounts and Brittany's. The inheritance was frozen, then transferred into a trust that my grandmother's estate attorney had set up to handle the probate process properly. True to my word, I signed away any claim to the money. It went to my father's education fund, to a scholarship in my grandmother's name at the University of Wisconsin, and to various charities she'd cared about. The divorce was brutal but straightforward. Brandon had no grounds to fight for custody given the charges against him. I kept the house, the kids, and full legal and physical custody. Brandon's lawyer negotiated for supervised visitation rights once he'd served his sentence. But we all knew those visits would never happen. Not really. Not when the kids grew old enough to understand what he'd done. 6 months after that day in the police station, I stood in the kitchen of the house that was finally, truly mine. Emma was doing her homework at the table. Tyler was building something with Legos on the living room floor. The mortgage still existed, the car payments were still there. Life was exactly as hard as it had been before the inheritance arrived. But it was clean. It was honest. It was mine. The cardinal came back to the bird feeder in spring, just like it did every year. I watched it eat from the kitchen window and thought about my grandmother, how she'd known something was wrong, how she'd gone back to her lawyer to fix it, how she'd died before she could save herself, but managed to save me anyway. Sometimes the worst day of your life teaches you something the best day never could, that you're stronger than you thought, and that the life worth living is never the one someone else is building for you.